All right, welcome back to another episode of Bear's Guide to a 5. It's been some time, but now we are back in Unit 3, introducing culture. Now, this is a unit that definitely gets overlooked because we kind of just push it to the side as we talk about what people perceive as more serious topics because there's more theories and more, development and country building and statistics and whatever. But what we have to understand with culture is that it is so important to people that people are willing to defend it. So to understand, these upcoming units that we're going to go into, we really have to understand what makes people people. So popular culture versus folk culture. This is like the main point of the culture part of Unit 3. Basically, we can boil everything down to two types of culture. And the first one is popular culture or pop culture. It's practiced by large, heterogeneous groups. That means different types of people in all different types of places. It spreads rapidly through hierarchical diffusion and then contagious diffusion, and it originates from a specific point or source, and it's usually for profit. The picture on the right that you're looking at, you're able to identify all those things. People all around the world can identify these things, whether it be Gucci or Supreme or Nintendo or different celebrities, right? All this is pop culture, and everyone throughout the world knows this stuff. And not only do they know about it, but they can consume that culture because it's meant to be for everybody. Whereas on the other hand, we introduce folk culture. Folk culture is practiced by small, homogeneous groups, small, similar groups of people from the same place, and it spreads slowly through relocation diffusion. When we talked about relocation diffusion the first time, we attached it to cultures. And really, those cultures only spread when people bring their culture with them, and they're not trying to actively, bring other people into the culture. It originates from multiple or anonymous sources. We'll see more examples of this as we explore the chapter more. And it's usually based on the elements of everyday life and the community that people grow up in. Like if you look at all the pictures to the right, those are unique cultural things happening, and we can place where in the world those things are probably happening because of their unique identifiers to their culture. And that's the biggest thing between folk culture and pop culture. Pop culture is uniform or not bland, but easily digestible by lots of different people all around the world. Like you don't need to be like American to listen to Drake or something like that. You know what I mean? Or Canadian, I guess, because he's Canadian. But yeah. Anyway, the idea is that folk culture is very unique to the place that it comes from, and we'll talk more about. So, folk cultures vary greatly from place to place. If you base your culture on location, then you're going to have a different culture in every different place. And that's essentially what folk culture is, right? Like, it is unique to that location. And that's why when we look at it, our initial thing is like, oh, that's so strange, or oh, that's so different, because it is so unique to that geographical place in the world, whether it be to the type of agriculture, to the type of building structures, to the type of clothes they're wearing, to the types of holidays they celebrate, or the songs that they sing. It's all based on that. So, how does culture affect the landscape? Now, we've heard this word before, cultural landscape, and now we're finally seeing it. It's anything humans build on the landscape, anything on the Earth's surface that was built by humans that reflects any part of our culture is the cultural landscape. Now, the cultural landscape can show an area's folk culture, as it did in the previous pictures, like you were able to point out where these folk cultures were, but it can also be a reflection of pop culture, right? And that's the uniform landscape. This is when everything starts to look the same. Like when we look around our community in Tampa Bay, like even the regular buildings are part of the cultural landscape. It's just the uniform landscape. And as we see around the world, more and more places are beginning to look the same because they have the same types of businesses or they have the same type of building structure. That pop culture is spreading everywhere, making everything look uniform. And we call this idea cultural imperialism, which we're going to dig into a lot in this part of the unit specifically. So, as people migrate, and we talked a lot about migration, cultures from around the world interact with each other. And three things generally happen as people migrate and culture interacts with each other. We see syncretism, acculturation, and assimilation. Very important vocab words. Syncretism is the blending of cultures into like this new culture. Acculturation, or as it's better known for some people, is code switching, where you adopt a second culture, but you switch between them based on where you are. So you might practice a different culture at home, speaking a certain languages or having, certain practices or rituals or celebrating certain holidays, and then you switch to another culture when, say, you go to school or work. And then assimilation is just straight dropping that first culture and everything with it and moving to this new culture. And we see this a lot in countries when people migrate. Generally, assimilation is what the people inside of a country want migrants to do. Migrants generally want to acculturate, some want to assimilate. And then syncretism is generally a result of people really not planning the blending of ideas. So, what is this cultural imperialism thing? So, cultural imperialism occurs as syncretism, as acculturation, as assimilation happens. Basically, more and more people are falling to the pop culture of the Western world. And some people really don't appreciate that because they see the Western world as, consumerism based, capitalistic based, all about money. And people fear this pop culture imperialism. And then let's be real, pop culture comes from the Western world, like North America, the US, Canada, and Western Europe. A lot of what we consume throughout the world, especially with entertainment and art, comes from the West. And a lot of it is ours. And you see this picture on your screen. All of this stuff is a reflection of pop culture. All of this stuff is what is heard throughout the world. I know it's a picture from 2013, but still, it's like all the stuff that we're used to seeing. And some people around the world resist this pop culture imperialism. They don't want this. But something that we're going to explore is the idea of, can you resist it? Can you resist cultural imperialism today? Can you resist the Western influence around the world? And that's something that we're just going to keep thinking about as we go through this stuff. So then we have contact zones and shatter belts. So as people interact with each other, as pop culture imperialism happens, obviously cultures are going to contact each other. And sometimes those things can turn violent, right? People who are resisting pop culture imperialism, people that are resisting this Western influence, people that want to preserve their folk culture. Or maybe it's two folk cultures colliding, or maybe, whatever it may be. Maybe it's two religions colliding or two language groups colliding. But it can turn violent. One contact zone is between Muslims and Hindus, between India and Pakistan, which today still leads to tension, and we can talk about that more in class, but there's plenty of them all around the world and plenty of them that have happened in history. So just something else to consider when we talk about culture and everything that comes with it. So what you need to know today. First, the most basic thing is be able to know the difference between popular and folk culture. Number one thing you got to be able to do. If you can't do this, you're going to really struggle with understanding these concepts. Next, what is the cultural landscape and what is the uniform landscape? Make sure you can explain the process of syncretism, acculturation, and assimilation. Understand that sharing of pop culture has led to cultural imperialism. And then finally, you have to be able to explain what can happen when cultures meet. There's a lot of stuff packed into a PowerPoint. Relatively pretty short, but a lot of vocab, a lot of conceptual stuff. But I feel like we can just run through this and understand this vocab. And we'll find more times to talk about it as we go through, different examples and stuff like that in the course. So, as always, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe. Hit that bell icon so you know when new videos are posted so you can keep up to date. And as always, this is Bear's Guide to a 5. We'll see you next time.